Have you ever wondered what it's like to get an email that commands all of your attention from the world's richest man? If you've never heard of a question mark email, well, buckle up. In this video, I'm going to walk you through this very peculiar form of management from one of the world's most innovative companies, what it's like to get one of these emails, and walk you through an example from which I was responsible. As a former executive at Amazon who was responsible for the Kindle reading platform, I was a recipient of many of these emails, and they're fun. They're fun. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video for a special piece of bonus content just for you. Before we get started, I want to set a little bit of context. One of the goals I set for myself with InterviewAt was to make sure that I was teaching people how to leverage the frameworks for talent management at many of the most innovative companies in the world at which I've worked, and how you could leverage that for yourself despite having never worked there in terms of how you show up at an interview, present yourself, and stand out as a candidate. Now, a lot of what I teach with InterviewAt is about the leadership principles at Amazon. I lean really heavily on them. Why? Because it's a great way to deliver feedback. Well, this specific question that I got asked is leadership principles in action, and it's a pretty good teaching tool for kind of how it worked and how I would describe it in an interview. So, what exactly is it like to get a Jeff question mark email? Okay, kidding aside. Yeah, it is stressful when you get one of these, but how does it come to you and what's the process? So typically a customer would send an email to Jeff saying, I have a problem with this product, or I ordered this thing and it didn't work, or the site wasn't working correctly, whatever it is. And Jeff doesn't read all of his emails, but some of them do filter through his handlers, and the ones that get to him and he reads and he decides it's something that needs looking into, he will simply forward it to the appropriate SVP with one character, a question mark. When that SVP gets the email, he looks at it or she looks at it and says, okay, I know who this goes to, and forwards it to that person. And the expectation there is drop everything you're doing and get Jeff an answer within 24 hours. That is the truth. You drop everything you're doing, doesn't matter what you're doing, you drop everything that you're doing and you get the answers within 24 hours. Well, so what does that mean, get him the answers? Well, it means define the problem very clearly. What was it? Who was impacted by it? Is it a real problem or is it a bug? If you have to speak to the customer, do that. If you have to pull customer logs, do that. If you have to pull data from the database, do that. Whatever you have to do, get all of the data that you need and get Jeff an answer. If within 24 hours you can't get him that answer, you simply provide what you have at the end of 24 hours and you provide a timeline for when you are going to have an answer. And that timeline can't be a couple weeks, we'll get to it. No, you have to work with a high degree of urgency, but sometimes these things take a little bit longer, as the example I'm going to walk through in a minute shows. So now let's talk about a practical example. What happened with mine? Well, with one sentence on an earnings call, the Barnes & Noble CEO completely blew up my week. The statement was something along the lines of, we have the highest rated Android and iOS reading apps in the app stores, and that includes Apple's iBooks and Amazon's Kindle app. And Jeff didn't like hearing that, and so that was the source of the question mark that came to my inbox. First things first in our response to Jeff, was this true? Well, yes, it was. Inexplicably, the Barnes & Noble app had something like 20 times the number of reviews for their most recent version of their app, and they were a full 2.1 stars higher than us in the iOS App Store. So we were definitely confused by the data that we were seeing. We knew that they were rated higher, but we didn't realize they had that many more reviews. So that was definitely a surprise for us. So that summary was the basic gist of what we sent to Jeff in the first 24 hours, but it wasn't enough. I mean, obviously we can't just send an email to the CEO and say, yeah, we're getting roasted in the store. We'll figure this out and we'll get back to you. That's not really an acceptable answer. So we had framed up a couple of hypotheses as to what was going on, and it's basically hinged on something that we knew to be true, which was in the App Store, any individual user could review the app with each new version, and we had just assumed that at that point we had been in the market so long that the number of reviews that we were getting were mostly from kind of late stage users, not the early adopters, and therefore the review stars were just going down because these were people who were just less comfortable with reading apps, weren't as excited about the app, etc., and that the Barnes & Noble app was just newer, and that's why they were rating higher. Turns out we were wrong about that. So given the summary of the mail that we had sent Jeff, we also knew that we needed to get more data, and we asked for a little bit more time. So we basically said we needed 48 hours and we were going to go explore the App Store and see what we could learn about how customers were responding to the app, what they were saying about the app, what the review counts looked like, etc. And so what do? We were in the middle of a release cycle, so I didn't want to pull any of my developers off the applications that they were working on. So that was kind of a problem. And so I decided to write some code, wrote some Python script to go scrape the iOS App Store and pull down all of the reviews, word for word, including the ratings themselves, for a large handful of applications by app ID, all of the Amazon apps, all of the reading apps, and then a variety of other popular apps, so that we could do some data spelunking to really understand what was going on with the review counts, the reviews themselves, and see if we could find any patterns. Once we pulled all this data, we started plotting it, and unsurprisingly, all the data pretty much looked the same. a lot of peaks with a lot of reviews happening all at once, and then a long run of no reviews and then another peak. Pulling data, it was pretty clear that the peaks were around releases for the different apps, and so it was obvious what was going on. A new app would come out, either the existing customers would review, or new customers would review it, or new people would download it because it was a new release and get excited. So that was what was driving the kind of pattern of peaks and valleys of reviews for all the apps. And pretty much all of them looked identical, with the exception of Barnes & Noble. Theirs was different. What we found most, we'll call it interesting, about the Barnes & Noble app was that the current version at that time had, I think it was 3 times as many reviews as the most reviewed Kindle app ever in the iOS store. And the current version at that time of the Barnes & Noble app had more reviews than the Kindle app and the iBooks app combined, which seems a little strange when you consider that the iBooks app was rated above Kindle in terms of downloads and where they were in the App Store, and then Barnes & Noble was somewhat behind us. So it didn't really make a lot of sense, and so we had some more spelunking to do. And so in looking deeper at the data, what jumped out about the Barnes & Noble app was historically they had a low number of app reviews per day, like 4 or 5 app reviews per day. And then right around some new release, all of a sudden within some day lag of that, the pattern changed. And it looked more like a consistent number of reviews on a day-to-day basis, bouncing between, kind of 7, 8, 9 to as many as 25. And their average jumped from about 4 to 5 reviews a day to as many as 10 to 12 a day, which when you think about it, says something's going on. And the conclusion that we drew was something not right, and we wanted to get to the bottom of it. We spent a lot of time trying to analyze the different features that were announced with the Barnes & Noble apps, looking at their release days to see if there was any patterns we could figure out there. And at the end of the day, we really just couldn't quite piece together why all of a sudden their daily review count would be a consistent number post-launch. And so we started looking at some other data. We looked at the reviews themselves, and we're looking for any patterns that we could identify to see if people were really excited about the app. It was right around the time the Retina iPads came out. And it turned out what we found was the word count changed all of a sudden. The 5-star reviews for the Barnes & Noble app used to get some number of words on average. And now all of a sudden they were getting tons of 5-star reviews with far, far fewer words per review on average. So clearly something was up. So at this point, we knew we were coming to the end of our 48-hour window. We'd done a lot of data analysis, and we knew that something was going on. Clearly something was going on with the application from Barnes & Noble that was garnering far more reviews on an ongoing and steady basis than made sense to us based on the data patterns we'd seen from all the other applications. Now remember, the timing of this was roughly 2012. And so asking for reviews really wasn't something that came to the front of mind. It felt dirty at the time. And so I told my team of product managers to reconvene after we sent our update to Jeff saying, hey, we need a little bit more time and we will get you an update as soon as we can. We're going to use the app as our primary driver in our team for the next 2 weeks. And as soon as we figure out what we think is going on here from a customer point of view, we thought maybe that, there was some new features in there that we weren't seeing, book discovery, something was, great about the application was causing people to want to review the application. And so my team and I ventured off to use the Barnes & Noble app as our primary reader for 2 weeks, and we kept a reading log to know, basically how often we were reading and how much time, so we could gather as much data as we could in that time period. And the answer revealed itself pretty quickly. So I'll definitely be the first to admit I was wrong. I had initially thought that they were astroturfing or paying for reviews or some, kind of weird process by which they were getting reviews. And it turns out they did the simplest thing possible, which was ask for reviews. But based on our reading logs, it seemed like they were only asking the most active of us. Now, I don't know what their triggering mechanism was or what their algorithm was, but it was clear that they were asking a subset of their users to rate and review the app, which again, at the time in 2012, felt, kind of slimy, and we didn't want to do it. But this was a pretty good forcing function to us to make a decision about what we wanted to do with the Kindle app. So we've talked a little bit about customer obsession, where we really took the Barnes & Noble app and spent a lot of time with it to see if we could figure out what they were doing to satisfy customers, to make customers so happy that they were willing to review the app far more frequently than they were reviewing the iBooks app or the Kindle app for iOS. We also had a little bit of dive deep where, wrote some Python code, which is probably not the best use of my time, considering what a great Python coder I am. But we did get the data that we needed. We did pull it into Excel, and we did a lot of data analysis to figure out what was going on. We dove really deep, and the charts that popped out made it absolutely clear what was going on, and we knew that we had to come up with a better solution. So at this point, we gave our update to Jeff and let him know that we would come back with a new feature that would basically allow us to basically do the same. And that was a decision point for us because we weren't sure that we wanted to be in the business of asking for reviews. So the final principle of play here was invent and simplify. We knew that we needed to come up with something that would feel good for customers, that would make us feel better about asking for reviews, and we kept it in line with understanding that not every customer really understands that they can re-review an application once they've done a review. And so we built a pretty cool little system, and I'm not going to go into the details of it in case it's still in use, but basically we figured out who our best customers were and made sure that they were the ones that we were asking for reviews. Almost immediately, the review count shot up. Our score went almost to a universal 5.0, and all of a sudden we were top of the Apple leaderboards for a period of time. And in fact, our marketing team called it the $1 million feature because of how effective it was at driving new user signups when we had releases.